we open at the moment, Congressman Duncan has to leave, so he's going to give some closing remarks.
Well, I want to thank the panelists. Joseph hit on a lot of things. One thing I was thinking about as the professor was speaking, and I hope, I believe that Secretary Madison, Secretary-elect, whatever you call it, future Secretary of Defense, I hope what he will do, and I hope what Donald Trump will do, is tell Iran that we're going to recognize international waters, but we're also having an exclusion zone around the United States naval vessels, and if you enter that exclusion zone, you will be blown out of the water, there will be a loss of life, and there won't be a warning shot. Your warning shot's right now. I believe that's how you have to deal with versions based on what I've seen and a lot of comments made here today. The other thing that I'd like to leave you with is we're not going to slow down with our focus in Latin America with the Iranian activity. To push the administration to understand and do another assessment of that activity, and we're going to push to secure our border. I can't emphasize enough that elements that want to do harm to our great nation will exploit the soft underbelly of this nation, and that is our southern border. Border security is important. We heard Joseph and I both mention OTMs. Those are real designated individuals that are not Hispanic, they're not of Mexican descent, that have crossed our border. They're not trying to come into our country. They're not apprehended in Mexico, Honduras, or El Salvador, or Guatemala, or Panama, or anywhere in Latin America. They have been apprehended on U.S. soil. And they're not Hispanic, they're not of Mexican descent, and we don't know why they've come that far. We believe that some may have come with nefarious goals in mind. So we need to keep that in mind as we think about homeland security, as we think about countering extremism and radical Islamic jihad, and all the things. So the last thing I'll leave you with, I hope the Trump administration will reassert that Hezbollah and Hamas are foreign terrorist organizations, and will add the Muslim Brotherhood to that list.
I do work with a lot of U.S. authorities, mostly on the left side of defense and intelligence, not so much with the State Department, although I've briefed them on some occasions. I think it's a matter of prioritizing. Okay, there's corruption, public corruption all throughout Latin America. You throw a rock and you hit a public official that's corrupt. So human rights is a problem, particularly in some countries. There's a lot of human rights violations, but again, maybe you throw a rock, you may not hit him the first time. You throw 10 rocks, you hit a human rights violator in Latin America. We have to prioritize what's in the best interest, or what's in the U.S. national interest in terms of what's most important for our national security. I see nothing in Latin America that's more important than our counterterrorism mission, because that's converged with our counter-transnational organized crime mission. The terrorists have figured out that the drugs are wholesale in Latin America, and if we get into that business, we can fill our coffers with much more money. Hezbollah control you want to send any kind of drug, be it cocaine, methamphetamines, ephedrine, whatever, east into Europe or Asia, you have to go through Hezbollah's business and making network. So the cartels, it's a service provider, so the cartels have figured that out, and that convergence has happened over time. I think that if we don't prioritize counterterrorism as a primary interest in Latin America, we're going to miss the window of opportunity that we have right now for certain governments that might not see that as their own priority, but they see U.S. relations as their priority. And they may come to us and they may ask for a bunch of other things. We want money for roads, and we want money for schools, and this and that, and we fund everything except for the most important thing, which is to make sure terrorists aren't coming in through our, what they call the U.S. Southern Security Perimeter. I mentioned before, I think this administration has that perspective. I hope they have that perspective. I've briefed many of the officials that are going into the administration, so I think they're aware of the threat. It's a matter of what to do with it. I honestly, I don't want to say this with too much pessimism, but I hope we're not too late, is the thing, because this has been going on for 30 years. It didn't start yesterday, and the Iranians have developed quite a capacity in Latin America. They know certain countries in Latin America better than we do, and they have better presence in Latin America than we do in certain countries. So, just for those that aren't familiar, there was a German newspaper, developed, that put out an article in 2011 that mentioned what the gentleman just asked, which is that in the northernmost point of the Caribbean coast of Venezuela an island called, well, a peninsula called the Paraguay Peninsula, that the Iranians had developed a missile silo, an underground bunker for ballistic missiles. Obviously, I was looking at the beach. I was in Venezuela at the time.
That was for peaceful purposes?
It is a missile for peaceful purposes. The design of a missile is quite the contrary. But, so, obviously it's something that I wanted to look at. I said, this is happening. This is something I should know about. So we worked on it very, very extensively. What I can tell you is that I looked at it from a military perspective where, they have a saying in the military that says, amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. So I wanted to know not why the Iranians would put a missile silo in Venezuela. I want to know, could they do that logistically? How would this work? There's got to be a supply chain that doesn't. Venezuela does not have a ballistic missile program, so that they have to create an indigenous missile program to work with. That's a very difficult thing to do. And what we came to find is, at the minimum, Iran has about 40 different bilateral military programs in Venezuela that are sanctioned. About half of those are sanctioned, meaning that they were evading sanctions through these programs using the Venezuelan oil industry, and created an infrastructure in Venezuela that at the minimum could procure minerals, metals, and materials from Latin America to feed their program in the homeland. Meaning uranium, thorium, tantalum, and all these things that were prohibited from UN and international US sanctions, they could have got it. Is it possible that the Iranians developed more than that? Sure, it's possible. I think that's an intelligence question. I think that our intelligence community has information on that. The question is, are they going to action anything actionable on that information? Venezuela's gone into a tailspin. At this point, you could buy anything. You could buy the country probably for very cheap. The country's doing very poorly economically, and what that does, it opens the doors for individuals or nation states like Iran and Russia and others to come in and penetrate and do what they do. I was going to mention this, and I ran out of time, but the most concerning aspect of Iran's presence in Latin America to me right now isn't the state sponsorship of terrorism. That is a very serious concern. I just testified in a Hezbollah terrorist trial in Peru, so that is something that I'm worried about. But it's their military capability that I'm most concerned with, because they have these kind of opaque military projects in about 7 different countries in Latin America, but we don't have a transparency over what they're actually doing. We know what they say they do. We know what the agreement says it does, but we don't know if it's a dual-use project that might do something else. And I think that's something that has to be answered in the very near future.
I'm sure that you at times can have conflicting or opposite views about the same subject in your mind, because we're human, and we do. The business of nuclear weapons for a group of people in the Iranian leadership today is an incentive. This is called Rhode. It's a group of people within the establishment, and they say the following: that in order for their Mahdi, for their Messiah to return, he disappeared in 873 or 872, I always get the year wrong, CE, is that they would provoke a war and they would be losing. And then miraculously, this would require their imam, the 12th imam, the 12th descendant of their prophet Muhammad, who disappeared in 872 or 3, and who have to come back to save them. And then they have this intellectual argument as who's going to be standing on the Mahdi's on the side. It's Muhammad on this side and Ali on this side, and they go back and forth and all. But the way to have that happen is through the shall we say, nuclear weapons, shall we say, a conflagration would be an inducement. Now, that is not everybody in Iran. And most of the Iranians, again, that I dealt with over the years, and it's been a very long time, think this would destroy their country. And I would be very sad if I can be in the fueling mode, in the safe space mode, and stuff like that. And Iran is an amazing culture. It's fascinating. How did they survive? All the Middle East today, which we call Arab, when the Arabs came out of the desert and overtook the Byzantine civilization and what is the Arab world today, which is Aramaic and mostly Christian. Within 100 years, it was largely Muslim and Arabicized linguistically. Not Iran. Persian culture went underground, was strong and vibrant, and reemerged after 300 years. It is amazing, absolutely amazing, that culture. And there's definitely also, I would say, the smartest people in the Middle East. That's a hard thing. Maybe the Iraqis are maybe a little smarter, and maybe it's Shiism, which is the answer, because Shiism requires thinking. In all of the religious libraries in Qom, the Iranian religious capital, if you wish, I know this because I've seen this, they have libraries on Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, because they want to know how others think about things. They're fascinated by this. That's Shiism. I don't know this to be the case in Iran. I have been in Najaf, but I have not seen any libraries. I don't know. Now, among the Sunnis, it's not that way. For the last 1,000 years, it's the opposite. All critical thinking is not allowed. All they have left, I know this sounds esoteric, but it is extremely important in understanding how people deal with the world today. Iran lives in this love-hate relationship with Islam. It has historically, outwardly chosen to be one thing, and inside been something very different. This is a battle. There's a love-hate relationship. It's oil and water. You can mix them forever, and they separate in the end. I've heard Iranians say that Shiism is an Iranian religion, because it's not an Arab religion. Well, that's a little hard to come up with, but if you look at the culture of these, this is Iran, it's amazing. It would be wonderful if that nation, if that culture would be part of the, if there is such thing as an international community, led by a resurgent and reborn United States of America.